In 1902, a young girl named Lily posed for a photograph while holding her beloved pet cat. The image captured a perfect moment of childhood innocence. But when modern historians digitized this heartwarming picture, a detail hidden in plain sight turned their blood cold. What was lurking in this seemingly sweet photograph? And how did it expose a town's darkest chapter that had been buried for over a century? Dr. Aris Thorne had seen thousands of old photographs during his career at the Northwood Municipal Archive. His latest project involved digitizing a collection of glass plate negatives that had been donated by a local estate sale. The collection contained over 300 images from the early 20th century. Most showed typical scenes from that era. There were formal family portraits, images of the town's main street, and pictures of local celebrations. Nothing seemed particularly remarkable until he came across one specific photograph. The image showed a young girl, perhaps 8 or 9 years old, sitting on an ornate wooden chair. She wore a white dress with delicate lace trim, typical of the period. Her dark hair was pulled back with a ribbon, but what made the photo special was the fluffy cat she cradled in her arms. The girl's face beamed with pure joy as she held the animal close. Written on the back of the glass plate in faded ink were the words, "Lily and Patches, Summer 1902. Aris carefully placed the negative on his high-resolution scanner. He wanted to capture every detail for the digital archive. The technology could reveal details invisible to the naked eye. As the scan progressed, he zoomed in to appreciate the craftsmanship of the old photograph. The clarity was remarkable for something so old. He could see individual strands of the girl's hair and the texture of her dress fabric. Then he focused on the cat. At first, everything seemed normal. Patches appeared to be a typical long-haired cat with gray and white fur, but as Aris enhanced the image further, an unsettling feeling crept over him. Something about the cat's eyes didn't look right. They were too perfect, too symmetrical. Real cats' eyes had a certain quality when photographed, especially with the camera technology of 1902. These eyes looked different. They were glassy and lifeless. He zoomed in even more, focusing on the fur around the cat's neck. What he saw made his heart skip a beat. There was a faint line, almost invisible, running along the animal's throat. It looked like a seam. Aris rubbed his eyes and looked again. The line was still there. This wasn't a living cat at all. Troubled by his discovery, Aris immediately sent the high-resolution scan to his colleague, Dr. Sarah Martinez, who specialized in forensic imaging. Her expertise had helped solve numerous historical mysteries. Within hours, she called him back with her analysis. Her voice was grave as she confirmed his suspicions the object in Lily's arms was not a living animal. The eyes were identified as glass, similar to those used in expensive dolls of that era. The fur appeared to be a combination of rabbit fur and other materials, carefully stitched over some kind of frame. Sarah's analysis raised deeply disturbing questions. The craftsmanship required to create such a realistic fake cat would have been extraordinary for 1902. More importantly, why would a little girl be photographed holding a fake cat with such genuine affection? The joy on her face was real. She clearly believed she was holding a beloved pet. Aris began investigating the girl in the photograph. He searched through the town's vital records, birth certificates, death certificates, and census data. What he found sent a chill down his spine. Lily Margaret Harrison had indeed lived in Northwood in 1902. She was the daughter of Thomas and Margaret Harrison, respectable members of the community. But the records showed that Lily had died in December of 1902, just months after the photograph was taken. The cause of death was listed as wasting sickness, described in the records as causing extreme fatigue and eventual respiratory failure. The term wasting sickness was vague, often used in that era when doctors couldn't identify a specific disease. But something about the timing troubled Aris. He expanded his search through the death records of 1902 and 1903. What he found was alarming. 12 other children in Northwood had died from the same mysterious illness during that period. All were between the ages of 6 and 12. All had experienced the same symptoms: gradual weakness, difficulty breathing, and eventual death. Aris turned to the local newspaper archives. The Northwood Gazette from that period painted a picture of growing fear in the community. Parents were terrified as more children fell ill. Some families fled the town, convinced that something in the air or water was poisoning their children. The local doctor, a man named Dr. Edmund Price, had published several articles dismissing the community's fears. He claimed the deaths were coincidental, caused by various common childhood ailments. He accused the townspeople of giving in to mass hysteria. But one name kept appearing in the margins of these stories: Silas Blackwood. He was described as a reclusive toy maker who lived on the outskirts of town. The newspaper mentioned him only in passing, noting that he had donated several of his creations to sick children during the outbreak. These toys were described as mechanical marvels, clockwork animals so lifelike that they seemed almost real. Eris searched for more information about Silas Blackwood. The man was somewhat of a local legend. He had moved to Northwood in the 1890s and established himself as a master craftsman. His mechanical toys were said to be extraordinary, far beyond anything else available at the time. But he was also feared. People whispered that he practiced dark arts, that his toys were too lifelike to be natural. After his own son died, in 1898, Silas became even more isolated, rarely leaving his workshop. The connection between Silas and Lily remained unclear until Eris discovered another item in the donated collection. It was a leather-bound diary, water-stained and fragile with age. The first page identified it as belonging to Margaret Harrison, Lily's mother. Eris carefully turned the brittle pages, reading entries from 1902. Margaret's words painted a heartbreaking picture. Lily had begun feeling tired in early November. At first, her parents thought she was simply worn out from school, but as days passed, she grew weaker. She could barely walk to the kitchen for meals. The entries became more desperate as November turned to December. Margaret wrote about trying every remedy the doctor suggested, but nothing helped. Then came the entry that made everything clear. On November 15th, Margaret wrote about an unexpected visitor. Silas Blackwood had appeared at their door with a gift for Lily. He had heard about her illness and wanted to bring her something to provide comfort. It was one of his mechanical cats, so realistic that it could almost pass for a living animal. He called it Patches. Margaret described how Lily's face lit up when she saw the toy. She clutched it close and refused to let it go, even while sleeping. The diary entries after that day grew increasingly frantic. Lily's condition worsened rapidly. She struggled to breathe. Her skin grew pale. On December 3, 1902, the entries stopped. That was the day Lily died. Eris now understood that the photograph showed Lily with the mechanical cat that Silas had given her. But why had this gift coincided with her rapid decline? He needed to know more about Silas Blackwood and his creations. He contacted the town's historical society and learned that Silas's workshop had been sealed after his death in 1904. His belongings had been packed away and eventually donated to the town's collection, but they had never been properly cataloged. The crates had sat unopened in the archive's basement for over a century. With special permission, Eris located the crates in a dusty corner of the storage area. There were 3 large wooden boxes, covered in decades of dust and cobwebs. Inside, he found tools, gears, springs, and partially completed mechanical animals. The craftsmanship was indeed extraordinary, but it was the small leather journal at the bottom of the 3rd crate that revealed the truth. The journal belonged to Silas Blackwood. The early entries showed a brilliant but troubled mind. He wrote extensively about his mechanical creations and his theories on making them more lifelike. But after his son William died in 1898, the tone changed dramatically. The entries became darker, filled with rage against the town that he felt had ignored his family's suffering. Silas wrote that when William had fallen ill, no one had helped. The doctor had been too busy with wealthier families. The neighbors had stayed away, afraid of catching whatever disease the boy had. Silas had watched his son waste away while the town carried on with its daily life, indifferent to his pain. The final entries were the most chilling. Silas had discovered a rare fungus that grew in the caves near Northwood. When dried and ground into a fine powder, it created a toxin that was colorless and odorless. In small doses over time, it caused symptoms identical to a wasting disease: gradual weakness, respiratory problems, and eventually death. The powder could be applied to fabric or fur and would remain active for weeks. Anyone who handled the contaminated material and breathed in the microscopic particles would slowly be poisoned. Silas had found his perfect revenge. He would make the town suffer as he had suffered. He would take their children just as his child had been taken. But he would do it in a way that no one would suspect. His mechanical animals, covered in fur coated with the toxic powder, would be his weapons. Given as gifts to sick children, they would be clutched close, slept with, and constantly handled. The children would breathe in the poison with every hug, every cuddle, every moment of comfort they sought from their new toy. The journal contained a list of 13 names. Lily Harrison was number 7. Each name had a date beside it, indicating when Silas had delivered his deadly gift. Harris cross-referenced these dates with the death records. Every child on the list had died within 3 to 4 weeks of receiving their toy. The wasting sickness that had terrorized Northwood wasn't a disease at all. It was murder, carefully planned and executed by a man whose grief had turned to madness. Silas had written his final entry on January 2, 1904. He knew he was dying, likely from exposure to his own poison. He expressed no remorse, only satisfaction that he had made the town pay for its indifference. He had taken 13 young lives in exchange for the one that had been stolen from him. Eris sat in the silent archive, surrounded by the evidence of a crime that had gone undetected for over a century. The photograph of Lillian Patches was no longer a sweet reminder of childhood innocence. It was evidence of a calculated murder. The joy on Lily's face as she held her mechanical cat was heartbreaking. She had no idea that the toy she loved was slowly killing her. The discovery raised difficult questions about justice and revenge. Silas Blackwood had been a genius, capable of creating incredible mechanical wonders. But his grief had twisted that genius into something monstrous. He had used his talents to commit acts of unimaginable cruelty against innocent children who had nothing to do with his loss. Eris carefully documented everything he had found. He worked with local historians to piece together the full story. They identified all 13 victims and traced what had happened to their families. Many had left Northwood after the tragedy, unable to bear the memories. The town itself had never fully recovered from that dark period. The mechanical cat from the photograph was never found. It had likely been buried with Lily or destroyed by her grieving parents. But other examples of Silas's work had survived, though none contained the deadly powder. They showed the extraordinary skill of their creator, even as they served as reminders of how that skill had been perverted. Modern analysis of the fungus Silas described confirmed it could have produced the symptoms recorded in the historical documents. The species still grew in the local caves, though it was now known to be highly toxic. Silas had been ahead of his time in understanding its properties and finding a way to weaponize it. The photograph that had started this investigation was eventually displayed in the town museum, accompanied by the full story of what it represented. Visitors would stare at the image of young Lily, her face full of joy and innocence, unaware of the tragedy that would soon unfold. It served as a powerful reminder that even the most innocent-looking images can hide terrible secrets. The story of Northwood's poisoned children had finally been told. After 120 years, the truth about the wasting sickness was revealed. It hadn't been a mysterious disease or mass hysteria. It had been the deliberate act of one man whose grief and anger had consumed him entirely. Silas Blackwood had turned his workshop into a factory of death, his creations into weapons, and his genius into an instrument of revenge. The discovery changed how the town understood its own history. The children who had died were no longer victims of an unknown illness but casualties of a crime that had gone undetected for over a century. Their names were added to a memorial in the town square, finally acknowledged for what had truly happened to them. Technology had made this discovery possible. The high-resolution scanning that revealed the fake cat, the forensic analysis that confirmed its artificial nature, and the careful detective work through digital archives had uncovered a truth that previous generations couldn't have found. A single photograph, preserved through time, had become the key to solving a mystery that had haunted Northwood for generations. Sometimes the most horrifying discoveries come from the most unexpected places. A photo of a girl and her cat, an image of pure innocence, had revealed one of the darkest chapters in the town's history. It showed that evil can hide behind the most innocent facades and that even acts of apparent kindness can mask terrible intentions. If you found this historical discovery as chilling as we did, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more stories that history tried to forget. Let us know in the comments what you think about this dark revelation and whether you believe justice can ever truly be served when the crime is discovered more than a century too late.